So I'll welcome you again. Welcome. Hi, Mom and Dad. Thank you for being here. Hi, everybody. Thank you especially for spending your day before the holiday with me and with the webinar. I know I'm excited to have the day off tomorrow, and I think this is a fun lead in, and I'm excited to share with you all today. I'll remind you, it looks like everybody that I can see is muted. Thank you. And you are welcome to use the closed captioning feature as you need to. There's a button at the bottom of your screen that says CC, Show Captions. So feel free to enable that. And we are recording, so this will be available later today should you want to review it or let somebody else know. I'll share the link for the recording in Monday's issue of the My Alliance newsletter. And if you have questions during our time together, feel free to use the chat. Normally, I tell the speaker, I'll watch the chat and you present, but since I'm doing double duty today, I will still watch the chat, but it may be a little bit before I can catch all the questions, but we'll manage. So feel free to use the chat as you choose to. And with that, I'm going to share my screen with the presentation for today, and then we will really get going. Let's see. Hopefully this is what I want. Yes. Everybody, I hope, can see that. You can give me a thumbs up or a nod or something. Let me know you can see my screen that's being shared. Thank you. Okay. So welcome to the weekly webinar. Those of you who have been here before know that every week, of course, we have a speaker and we talk about a topic that's relevant to brain health or community resources or just plain old fun. And I like to think that this week's topic checks all of those boxes. This is a presentation that is pretty self-indulgent, I will tell you, because it feeds my love of sharing information with you all, my love of reading books, and my love of sharing information that I get from books. So check, check, check. And you'll see on this opening slide here, it says, I'm Kelly G, and I am the Community Engagement Coordinator at the KU Alzheimer's Disease Research Center, which means I get to host this webinar. I get to go out into the community and share information. I get to observe and disseminate the great research that my colleagues are doing here at the ADRC. And you'll also see in parentheses there, I'm also a bookworm. I remember back in the year of 1991, I was 15 years old, and my grandmother, who many of you have heard about, my grandmother Grace said, "You sure do read a lot of books. You should track how many books you read in a year." And I said, challenge accepted. And so in the year of 1991, when I was 15, I read 191 books. And that included all the books I had to read for school, for my, English classes and other classes, and then all the books I wanted from the library, and all the books that we had in our house on the bookshelves. And I wrote them all down. This was long before, spreadsheets and Google Docs. So I had them in a notebook. And I wrote down the name and the author and the description. And I think I even wrote how many pages were each one and maybe a rating scale. And gosh, I wish I had that notebook still. Maybe it's in our house, Mom and Dad. Maybe I'll look for it next time I come home. But anyway, I'd like to think that all that reading and cataloging was good for my brain health, and I actually have some proof for you today that maybe it was. Have that on a slide coming up. So that's a little bit about me and the inspiration for today. And we will go on to the next slide. So why fiction? I mean, why this specific idea that reading a novel is good for our brain health? My response to that initially is, well, why wouldn't it be? Why wouldn't anything that gives you new information and lets you travel and lets you learn about something new, why wouldn't any of that be good for our brains? And alongside that, I will say the research that we are doing here at the KU ADRC is absolutely based on empirical evidence. We need facts. We need science. We need things to be reliable, sustainable, and repeatable. And that's how we have gotten to this place in 2025, where we know what we know about brain health, and even where we know that there are still things that we don't know. Many of you will know I have been working in this field since September 4th, 2001, so 24 years. And I am known to tell folks that if anybody had told me that almost 25 years later I would still be doing this, I would have said, wow. I can't even imagine myself at almost 50 years old and having a job. And I can't imagine that we won't have a cure for Alzheimer's disease. So the good news is that we're working on it. And we've come such a long way in those almost 25 years. And we have so many pieces of empirical evidence. We have so much science that we're aware of. We have facts. We know that early detection is important, and early detection, early diagnosis, early treatment is what gets us closer to figuring out the mystery of this disease. So what does that have to do with fiction? Fiction can be a bridge between science and soul. So fiction lets us walk in somebody else's shoes. Fiction lets us travel. I just finished reading a book that took place primarily in Texas, but also California and New York. It went overseas, it went around the world, and I'm just right here on Benton Boulevard in Kansas City, Missouri. So fiction is really powerful, and it can help us to bridge the things that we know for sure and the things that make our hearts warm. So with that said, I'm going to go to the next slide. I think I am. Yep. Okay. So let me tell you a bit about the cognitive benefits of reading fiction. So you'll know I didn't just make this up. I don't know if my colleague Rosie Pasqualini is on today, but shout out to Rosie because she and I actually kind of brainstormed this topic, and she told me that there was some research, some empirical evidence about the cognitive benefits of reading fiction. And she found this great article for me. And there was a study just about a year and 3 months ago at Maximilian University over there in Germany. So see what I said about traveling? Let's go to Germany and see what they learned about brain health. And I feel like Germany is maybe where Dr. Alzheimer might have spent some time, either Germany or Austria. So we're going back to our roots here, going back to our origins. And so a year ago, the researchers at Maximilian University in Germany did some studies, and they learned that reading fiction in particular, so not just reading, but reading fiction, is associated with enhanced cognitive function, improved empathy, improved abstract thinking, and improved problem solving. It's not really hard to understand why that might be true because, like I said before, when we read a book, we're living somebody else's life with them. We are walking in their footsteps. We are understanding their experiences. The book I actually just finished listening to, was an autobiography. Okay, fine. I'll tell you which one it was. It was Matriarch by Tina Knowles, who is the mother of superstar Beyonce Knowles Carter. And so her book really did read like a fiction novel, I'll tell you. I mean, this woman has had a life. But I can tell you, just having finished listening to that book today, I do feel like I have more empathy. I mean, do Beyonce and her mom need my empathy? I think they're probably doing well. But it was really cool to read the story of their lives from a small town in Texas to Hollywood superstardom. It helped me to think in lots of ways to keep track of their story. They have a big family with lots of people and lots of names, and I had to really focus and pay attention as I listened to the book, which I usually did as I was driving in my car. Reading books, whether they're autobiographies or novels, which we'll get to more in just a moment, helps us think about our abstract thinking because typically we read books that are just words on paper and we use our imaginations to think about what does this person look like? What is this environment they're describing? How many more pages do I have to read? And so you can see some real benefits there. So in this study at this German university, they had more than 30,000 participants, which I have to believe is statistically significant. And what statistically significant means is when you do a research study, you've got to have enough people to make the evidence that you find realistic and sustainable and legit, right? And so if you do a research study on one person, you get information about one person, which is nice. But when you have 30,000 people participating and the trend is that reading books is good for you, that's pretty relatable and reliable. I don't know. I'd have to ask Dr. Burns or Dr. Swerdlow or some of my colleagues. I don't know if the KUADRC has ever done a study with 30,000 people. Um, we are more typically, in my experience here over the last 3 years, we are looking at study sizes of 10, 20 people in a lot of cases. I know a whole lot of you are calling about the avocado study. You want to get those avocados and eat one every day. And I know a whole lot of you, when I go out into the community and I tell you we have a study about hot tubs, a whole lot of you are saying, ooh, 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 pick me, pick me. How do I know that? Because I'm one of them, and I'm very disappointed that I cannot participate in the hot tub study because you have to be 65, and I have still about 16 years. But anyway, is we have a large group of something like 30,000 people, we can be reasonably assured that the information we're getting back is reliable and true. So I believe with all my confidence that it must be true that people who read fiction often exhibit better verbal and general cognitive abilities compared to non-readers or to those who prefer nonfiction. Now, anybody who is sitting there thinking, but I'm not a fiction person, I'd rather read something else, do not despair. I tend to think that anything you read is a net positive. I see my mother telling my business in the chat. Yes, it is true. I grew up in Los Angeles, and I grew up with the great privilege of getting to attend a lot of sporting events, including very good seats at Los Angeles Laker games. I mean, and this was in the Kareem era, people. This was top tier basketball. I also team whose name I will not mention, but they played at the Coliseum in Los Angeles. They are a rival of our Chiefs. I won't say their name, but I will say I've been to a lot of their games. And as you may have seen in the chat, my mother is revealing that I did not realize my privilege at the time. And this was before smartphones and before Kindles and before electronics. So I would take an actual book to the game. I mean, a paper book. And when the lights went down, if it was a night game, I'd be so bad. Then what was I going to do? But I spent a lot of time at those games with one or both of my parents reading the book while something was happening down on the court or on the field. And I'd look up ever so often and clap when the other people clapped. But all that reading made me the person that I am today. And I'll say shout out to my dad, especially because one reason that I got to go to a lot of those games is that my dad was an OBGYN. He's retired now, living his best life. And some lady would have her baby on the same day of the basketball game or the football game. And he had these tickets. So who was going to take his place? Me. It was great. So anyway, a little backstory and a little evidence. One person, but I think it's significant about how fiction gives us great benefits, great memories, great connections with our families and with our community. So that being said, I hope you're all with me in understanding that science says reading is good for us. And I'm going to shift to my next slide, which is about a book I read. You know, these smartphones that we have, if your mom won't tell your business, your phone will. And I'll tell you that this morning, my phone reminded me that 1 month ago today, I finished reading Say You'll Remember Me by Abby Jimenez. How does my phone know that? Because I read it mostly on my phone as an electronic book. Did I tell my phone, please remind me that I finished this book because I'm going to do this weekly webinar? I don't remember doing that, but it's possible. But the timing is great because this is a book that I probably would have read anyway. I've heard a lot about this author, Abby Jimenez. This was my first book by her. And then when I found out the storyline was about dementia, I was super excited. So this book, Say You'll Remember Me, you probably can tell from the title, is about a person who has some cognitive changes. The main character in the book is named Samantha Diaz, who returns home to help care for her mother, who is 54 years old. So the first thing I want to point out to you about that is, wow, 54. That's not the typical age we tend to think of in someone that has cognitive change or memory loss or a dementia diagnosis. So as soon as I saw that in the book, I thought, oh, this is going to be something, so young. And I think her daughter, Samantha, was probably, I don't know, 25, 27. She was under 30. I do remember that. And so the story is that Samantha lives in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and her mother, who, fun fact, I can't remember her name. I read the whole book, but it's been a month, but I cannot remember the mom's name at all from the book. I'm very sorry about that, mom, in the book. But anyway, Samantha lives in Minneapolis. Her mother lives in Los Angeles, and her mother exhibits some signs of dementia that, I, as a KU ADRC person, was quite familiar with as I turned the pages of the book. So she has to move from Minneapolis to Los Angeles. Poor thing. What a burden to have to leave cold Minneapolis and move to weather paradise in Los Angeles. But the things we do for our families, right? So she moves to Los Angeles to care for her mom. But the night before she moves from Minneapolis to Los Angeles, she meets Xavier Rush. Doesn't that sound like a handsome fellow? Xavier Rush. And he's a veterinarian. So now he's even more handsome because he takes care of pets. And she meets him. They meet at a bar, if I remember correctly. And just like every character in every romance novel ever, they meet each other and they are into each other like immediately. And they meet and they have this one wonderful night together, and then they have to be parted because it's a dramatic device. That's how books work. And so then the rest of the book is how Abby is torn, or not Abby, what's her name? Samantha. Samantha is torn between Xavier Rush, the hot veterinarian, and having to take care of her mom with dementia in California. And so some things I want to point out to you. This book, which is probably, I don't know, 250, 300 pages, does not ever specify what kind of dementia Samantha's mom has. It never says that it's specifically Alzheimer's or Lewy body dementia or frontotemporal dementia or vascular or any of the 70 different kinds of dementias. They never say. They use just the diagnosis of dementia. Now, of course, my professional brain and my empathetic, is that the word? My empathy brain says, was this a choice on the part of the author? Did she just want to have this umbrella of dementia? Did she not know that there are many different kinds of dementias? I mean, she obviously has never watched this webinar, or she would know that there are lots of different kinds of dementias. Was this just a plot device? I don't know. But she chooses, or maybe doesn't even choose, but she doesn't ever describe or define what kind of dementia this character has. And she does throughout the book talk about the character's dementia as being early onset dementia. And that is a bone I have to pick with the author. I'm going to tell you more about that in just a moment. She does a really nice job of explaining in this book that dementia is not just about memory loss, right? It's not just about I forgot something. It is about a change in the way people move through the world. It's not just what was that lady's name or why did I walk up these stairs, both of which have happened to me today. It is about my brain is not functioning the way that I need it to perform my activities of daily living. And she does a pretty good job of explaining that as the story develops. Something else I'll highlight in this book, Abby Jimenez, I could tell, or I assumed from her last name that she is a Latina person. And the people in the book are a Latino family. Actually, Xavier Rush, she never really defines his background, but I'm just going to assume that he probably is Latino also. And why I'm highlighting that, people, is that we know that in the Latino Hispanic community, the rate of Alzheimer's disease is higher than the general population. We know, because of all that scientific research, we know that Hispanics are 1.5 times more likely to get Alzheimer's disease. 1.5. Is that because of something innate about being Hispanic? Maybe or maybe not. It is absolutely because of systemic racism and because of access to care, probably for some people because of language differences, lots and lots of reasons. I'll tell you also that we know that in African Americans, in the Black community, that number is not just 1.5, twice. Black people are twice as likely to get Alzheimer's disease. And that is why I feel quite passionate about this topic. And also why I was excited to see a fiction book that made talking about this diagnosis accessible. Lots of people are not like us. We say, ooh, KUADRC, lots of research, lots of science, lots of facts. That sounds amazing. I mean, I know all of you agree with me on that. But there are lots of people out in the world who might say, a weekly webinar about brain health? Well, that sounds terrible. They don't know. And so books can help us to bridge that gap. A book that we read can make us say, oh, wow, this happened to this person in this book. This sounds familiar. Maybe I ought to look into this some more. And so Abby Jimenez did a really good job in her book of showing the impact of dementia on this family. I won't spoil it. However, if you've ever read a romance book, you know how it ends. But I won't tell you specifically. And it does really do a very nice job of explaining how memory loss reshapes family life and how we can navigate through that. So I would recommend reading Say You'll Remember Me by Abby Jimenez, especially if you feel like me, you want to be in Los Angeles right now, but you're in Minneapolis. It'll make you feel better. Okay, next book is called Welcome to the Honey B&B. And this book is by Melody Carlson. And this one is about a woman named Jewel McCary. You know, I always think it would be fun to get to name something. I don't have any children. I've had pets. Oh, did I stop sharing? Can you still see my screen? I can't find it anymore. Hang on. I need to be able to see my screen so I know what to say. Hang on. It's coming back. Okay, there we go. So anyway, I was saying Jewel McCary. Doesn't that sound like a person that you'd want to be friends with? So she moves from, I believe, Southern California, shout out, to her family home in Oregon to take care of her father. And this book does specify frontotemporal dementia. And that's something that has emerged lately. We've heard more about it primarily because of actor Bruce Willis, who revealed his diagnosis with FTD. Gosh, it's been a couple of years now, I believe. And so I was really excited to read this because how often do you find a book about frontotemporal dementia that's also a novel? I mean, wow, how's that going to work? And so what happens is that Jewel McCary and her daughter, whose name I also don't remember, I guess I only remember main characters' names. Jewel finds out that her father, whose name is CT, which is interesting because I think of the letter CT for CAT scan, and I don't know if that was intentional on the part of the author. Jewel moves back home to take care of her father, CT, who lives on a farm. And so shout out to all my Kansas and Missouri farmers that I've met over the years. I felt like I had some inside knowledge about that. So Jewel moves back home and her father has frontotemporal dementia. And so she's home to help her father, to help her mother. She brings her teenage daughter with her. And it's really a lovely story. Interesting fact, it is based on the real life experience of Melody Carlson, whose husband has recently passed away, and he had frontotemporal dementia. And I imagine that was a way that she worked out her grief by writing this book. So we talk about families who had kind of been estranged and they come together to participate in caregiving. They talk about old friends. The book is pretty funny in a lot of places. One of my favorite parts of this book were the chapters that were written from CT's, the dad, the husband who has FTD. They were written from his perspective, and they were really well done, I thought. I mean, I don't know that I have had a lot of conversations with someone who has FTD. I've mostly, read research articles, and I've seen what Bruce Willis and his family have to say. But I felt like Melody Carlson really did a nice job of capturing what the internal dialogue or monologue of someone with FTD might be. And she did it with a sense of humor. And I finished reading this book feeling like, wow, I'm so glad this book is out here because it really is offering, like you'll see on the screen, a gentle and realistic portrayal of how dementia progresses through the brain and into family. I will say that this book, Melody Carlson is an author who typically writes from a faith-based perspective. And I believe her tradition is Christian. So there are some parts of the book that show her relying on her main characters and I presume the author's faith. So, keep that in mind if this is a book that you choose to read. It's really nicely done. And so I'm glad that it too exists. Now, I said some nice things about these books, and they're all true. But also, I can't tell you about these books and not tell you I wish either or both of these authors had called me at the KUADRC, or if not me, I wish they had called someone and said, am I getting this right? Both books referred to the phrase early onset dementia. And you'll see on the screen here that I have put that in big red letters and I have drawn a red line through it and put an X by it because I quibble with this terminology of early onset dementia. Whenever I see that, I think, does that mean there's a certain age at which people are supposed to get dementia? Like it's automatic? And the answer is no. We hear about Alzheimer's disease. I will even admit that growing up, I called it old timers disease because the assumption was that people who are old, which is, 60 or 65, according to the Older Americans Act, are going to get Alzheimer's disease automatically. Well, now I know better. Now that I know that that's true. We do know that lots of people, maybe even most people who have a dementia diagnosis are old, but it is not true that it is any sort of early onset because I think that just kind of implies that there's an age at which you're supposed to get Alzheimer's, and that isn't necessarily true. So cross out early onset dementia and maybe let's replace it with younger onset dementia. I think that might be a better term. We know that most people who have dementia are age 65 or more. We also know that age is the single most important risk factor in dementia. So age does increase our risk. However, age alone does not cause dementia. So people do not get dementia, any of the more than 70 different kinds of dementias, simply because they have more candles on their birthday cake. In the same vein, we also know that people who are younger than 65 can have dementia. I do not remember how old Bruce Willis was when he shared his diagnosis. I don't remember if he was younger than 65, but I don't think he was more than 70. We also know that Robin Williams, who had Lewy body dementia, I do not believe he was 65. Those are just two examples that come to mind. And we do know, because of research, that some kinds of dementia, including frontotemporal, which is the one that's in the book, do occur more frequently in people younger than 65. And so those are some facts that neither author really included in their book. I guess they wanted to concentrate on the romance plot, but I'd like to make sure that people out in the world know. So the last 2 points on this slide, we have a kind of a quiz for you, and I have somehow lost my ability to see you all. And I'm scared to touch anything and try to bring it back. So I'm just assuming you're still watching along with me. Blank percent of people 65 and older have Alzheimer's disease. And blank percent of people age 85 and older have Alzheimer's disease. If anybody knows the answer to that who is not someone who works at the KUADRC, I'd love to know what you think. You can put it in the chat. I wish I could tell you there will be a prize. Oh, wait, there you are back, but now I don't see my screen anymore. Can you all still see my screen? Yes, thank you. Okay, who thinks they know the answer of how many people 65 and older have Alzheimer's disease? What percentage do you think it is? Any guesses? You're all too shy. Nobody wants to say the answer. I already told you that there is a prize. There isn't a prize, so you're not going to go for it. Okay, fine. I will. Thank you for the person in the chat who said 45/60. And another person says 25. I have good news for both of you and good news for the whole group. I think I see my dad saying 5%. Okay, no, 10, 5, 10. I don't know what you're saying. Anyway, I have good news for all of you. I have bad news first. I'm going to tell you the bad news first. The bad news is that you're wrong. 45 and 60 and 25 is wrong. And also, did I mention that it's wrong? The good news is that we think that only about 10% of people 65 and older have Alzheimer's disease. And what that means is, I don't know that we know specifically a number, but what it does mean is that probably a much smaller percentage of people have Alzheimer's disease who are 65 and older than you might think. So only about 10%. We also know, however, that as we age up to 85, about 30 to 40 to 50% of people have Alzheimer's disease. Now, does that mean you should be very worried on your 85th birthday? No. It does mean that that's some evidence that age, as we get older, our risk of having this disease gets higher. That's what I want you to take away from that. Not that you should be worried about being 85. If you make it to 85, your chances of living past 85 are better. I know that probably sounds a little obvious, but the longer you live, the longer you live. The longer you live without Alzheimer's disease, that's probably a net positive. Okay. All right. I'm going to see if I can get my screen back. Oh, there it is. Okay, for me. Good. It's really small, though. I should get my glasses out. Okay, but now how do I change the slide? I do not know. I have never done this way, guys, so I don't know. So hang on, I'm going to stop sharing for just a moment because I don't know where the rest of my slides are. So you can just look at my face here for a moment. Okay. All right. I know that it is past time. I knew when I signed myself up to do this that we were not going to get to all of the information. So I am going to tell you that my next slide was a whole thing about frontotemporal dementia. I'll be happy to share these slides with everybody after today. Just send an email to myalliance@kumc.edu, and you can get some more information about frontotemporal dementia. And because we're getting close to time, I suppose I will just sort of pause there. I'm going to see if I can get my screen back because there are a couple other things I want to be sure that you see while I've got this captive audience here. Okay. So just so you know, here's the slide I had about frontotemporal dementia, and I'm happy to share. What I want you to know is that there are lots and lots of books about dementia out there on the market. It's a hot topic these days. These are just a few. I have read the one on the left, which is called Tangles, and it's actually a graphic novel, sort of like a comic book about Alzheimer's. It's fantastic. It will make you cry. It will make you laugh. It tells a lot of the realities of being a caregiver. It's about an adult daughter whose mom has a diagnosis of dementia. It's beautiful. Absolutely recommend that without any reservation. The other book on this screen I have read is called Wilfred Gordon McDonald Partridge, and it's a book that you might call a child's book, a children's book, but I mean, I first read it when I was like 25, which, you know, is probably equivalent to childhood. I'm much smarter now than I was at 25. But it's a beautiful story about Wilfred Gordon, who understands how his friend's memory changes and he still loves her. Those two I recommend. I know we have Wilfred Gordon McDonald Partridge in our library at the ADRC. I'm not sure about whether we have any of these others, but I can confirm they are all available at your local public library. So take a look, and like I said, I'll share these slides if anybody wants to track some of these down. I don't want to leave without telling you a little more about our dementia library. It's at the Memory Clinic, which is at our office on Shawnee Mission Parkway, 4350 Shawnee Mission Parkway, Fairway, Kansas. KU Clinical Research Center on the third floor. You can walk into the clinic and come down to what I think is the north end of the clinic, and you can see our beautiful library here. And we have multiple copies of lots of books, fiction and nonfiction, about dementia. And just like a public library, you can take a book, fill out a card. We don't have an electronic checkout process yet, but take a book, fill out a card, let us know you're taking it, bring it back when you're done. Maybe 30 days or so, but we won't fine you if it's more than 30 days. So you can come and take a look at that, and just drop it back in the bottom of the bookshelves here. And we've got lots of great books there. We've got support groups through our ADRC. We have our Care Assist app, which you probably know about from our newsletter. You know about My Alliance because you're here with me today. We have all kinds of great research studies. We have shout out to my social worker friends. We have the Cognitive Care Network, which will help you on your journey of having dementia or caring for someone with dementia. Our friends at the Alzheimer's Association have a 24-hour telephone line that you can call, literally 24 hours, 7 days a week. And then I am your friendly community engagement coordinator. You're welcome to send emails to me or give me a call, and I'll be happy to answer questions. So this is my last slide. Thank you for booking me today. I hope you found this useful. I hope you'll find some great books. I hope you'll tell me about great books you find, because I'm always wanting to read something. All right, I stopped sharing 2:35. Not bad. Any questions, any comments, any books you've read that you want me to know about? Please feel free to put those in the chat or send me an email. I'm always reading a book, always, always, always. And if it's got something to do with dementia, I'm even happier because then I feel like I'm being productive and I'm doing my work. But keep in mind, like we said from before, thanks to our friends in Germany, we know that reading fiction is good for your brain health. And I know that's something a lot of you are super interested in. You're always asking, what can I do? How many avocados? How long do I sit in the hot tub? How many miles do I walk? Speaking of walking, I went on a walk this morning. I walked 3 miles at Little Mill Creek, I think that's the name of it, park over in Lenexa. So I walked, I've been reading my book. I've now shared this with you. We know socialization and being with people is a great way to keep your brain healthy. So I recommend all of those things. Thank you for the notes in the chat. It's definitely past time. I'll tell you one more thing. Next week's speaker, you're not going to believe this. It's me. I will be back with you next week. As many of you should know, we have our annual dementia training room coming up on July 18th, Friday, July 18th. And so next week, I'm going to tell you about the training room. I'm going to give you a sneak peek. I'm going to give you some information about the topics we're including. And so I hope you'll join us to hear about the training room. And if you can make it to the training room, yes, we want you to come out in person. But if you can't, we'll give you a tidbit of the training room. So that's next week. And next week, I'm also going to tell you about this movie called The Mama Joe Project that I am in. I'm so excited about it. I want you to come see it. And so I'll tell you about that next week. You have to come back next week and watch. To the question about which book had the Christian slant, that one is called, I'll put it in the chat, Welcome to the Honey Bee and Bee. The main character's mom's name is Honey. So I can remember that. And it's by Melody Carlson, and I can confirm it's available at the Kansas City Public Library because that's where I got my copy, and I have turned it in, so it should be available. And then the other one was Say You'll Remember Me by Abby Jimenez. And I will make sure that this presentation, it'll be recorded, so if you want to go back and look at the stuff I shared, or if you want the list of stuff I didn't get to because I can't stop talking, I'm happy to share it. All right, folks, thank you so much. Fun to be with you. I'm going to figure out, I learned a little bit about how to share my screen and see you at the same time. I like that better because otherwise I feel like I'm talking to myself, which I do, but it's more fun to see you. Look forward to having a great holiday tomorrow. Happy 4th. Stay cool. Enjoy the day. We'll be back next week on Monday with the newsletter and on Thursday with another webinar. Take care, everybody. Thank you. Thanks, Mom and Dad. Bye.